After weeks of tension over foreign policy, economic messaging, and most of all, the fight over releasing the Epstein files, President Trump has now formally broken up with his once loyal MAGA ally, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. He made the announcement in a lengthy Truth Social post, saying all she does is, quote, complain, 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 withdrawing support for her in 2026. He also claims the fight started after he told her she, quote, didn't have a chance running for senator or governor. That rift exploded online yesterday when President Trump took to Truth Social to road test some new nicknames. First, calling her Marjorie Taylor Brown, explaining, quote, green grass turns brown when it begins to rot. Then opting for Marjorie Traitor Greene. This is the President of the United States. Nonetheless, Congresswoman Greene is holding strong, warning her colleagues ahead of Tuesday's vote. She said, you vote no on Tuesday to release the Epstein files and face severe outrage from America. Republicans don't have support from women, and this right here is a perfect example of why. It is, in other words, the beginning of a full-blown MAGA family feud erupting just as the House prepares for that rare vote to make the Epstein records public, and it shows no signs of slowing down.
President Trump and his administration does deserve a lot of credit for lowering inflation and holding it steady. But that doesn't bring prices down. And so gaslighting the people and trying to tell them that prices have come down is not helping. It's actually infuriating people.
Does Marjorie Taylor Greene have a point?
Does she have a point, though?
I know nothing about her.
On the release of the files. All the files.
Well, they can have whatever they want. They already do. I think they have 50,000 pages already. Look, this is a Democrat hoax. This is a hoax put out by the Democrat, and a few Republicans have gone along with it because they're weak and ineffective.
And while Trump may claim this is all part of a Democratic hoax, many of his supporters aren't listening. According to new polling from the Associated Press, just 68% of Republicans say they approve of Trump's handling of the federal government. That is down double digits from March. Joining us now to talk about all of this, Notice White House correspondent Jasmine Wright and MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Morning.
We hate a breakup, you know. It's very sad for the family. Very sad for the kids. For the children. I want to start with you because, you know, all of us have been trying to get in Trump's head for a very long time. And there's one thing that we really have learned is that for him, loyalty is a one-way street, right? That at the end of the day, if you do anything that he feels like is stepping out of line, he throws you out to the woods. But we've seen him come back from this, right? Him and Elon are kind of becoming friends or whatever, frenemies again. But this feels deeper, right? This is on policy. And Marjorie Taylor Greene honestly seems to be more of the purist when it comes to the America First argument, right? Like Trump is kind of outside of the bounds of what the America First movement was about.
Yeah, she continues to say that she is still America First and America only, and that is what is really fueling some of the complaints. But this is just not the first time that we've heard Marjorie Taylor Greene over the course of the last 3 months really complain about the Trump administration. The president is right in that. She has really pushed back on him with all of the foreign wars that he says that he is trying to end or draw to a close, pushed back on him with all the foreign leaders that he has continued to bring into the White House or go across the world to see, basically saying that there's not been enough focus on America First, and thus you see reflected in the prices. And so her name has been something that has come up a lot when I talk to White House officials behind the scenes about they don't know what's happening with her, or they say that after they did have that conversation about the fact that she shouldn't run for Senate because the poll numbers, they said, just weren't there, that that she kind of changed. And so there has been a lot of concern and, some anger at Marjorie Taylor Greene just behind the scenes for the past few months as she has continued to complain about the White House. And now you see it, of course, spilling out in public open and obviously, capped off with those Trump comments.
One of the things that she said recently on NBC on Friday, no one cares about the foreign countries. No one cares about the never-ending amount of foreign leaders coming to the White House every single week, speaking to your point there.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, you have covered Marjorie Taylor Greene very closely for a few years now, and it is, no matter what Trump is truth socialing, he cannot deny the closeness of their relationship and the mutual admiration up until this point. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene was the person who, the day after January 6th, still claimed, as all of the backlash was piling up on Trump, that this party is his. It doesn't belong to anyone else. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the trajectory of their relationship, but also Marjorie Taylor Greene's singular popularity?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard for me to believe that the polling actually wasn't in favor of Marjorie Taylor Greene when you're looking at a potential Senate race. She is one of the top grassroots fundraisers in the party. She's eschewed corporate donations. Just can you paint us a picture of her rise to this point?
I mean, it's hard to understate how close of an ally and how much of a loyal foot soldier she has been to President Donald Trump. To your point, Jackie, through all the ups, through all the downs, through all the hardships when he was pushed into potential political ending of his career, she was by his side and helped bring him back to life. And Marjorie Taylor Greene also came to Washington shrouded in controversy, right? She wasn't the biggest fan, people's biggest fan. Within weeks of her coming to Capitol Hill, she was stripped of her committee assignments. Democrats were running the House at that time, but it did get support from Republicans.
Like Jewish space lasers.
Right, she was.
Yeah, she was the reason for that.
And she has come from that in her first weeks in Washington to becoming such a loyal ally of the president. Now, to Jasmine's point, this has been simmering for a few weeks now, as we have seen MTG criticize President Trump on a number of fronts. But I think if you were talking even a year ago that they would have this public and this searing of a breakup, I don't think many people would believe it. One thing that I've been thinking about, and I've interviewed MTG a number of times. It was an interview I did with her back in 2023, and it was about her relationship with Mike Johnson. But listen to what she told me. She said, I am not the Republican team player. I never have been. I think a lot of folks never thought that would transcend President Trump. But here we are now, and it's just a big question of, does the MAGA movement stay with her ideas and where she's going, which, to Jasmine's point, is very much so MAGA and America first if you look at the definition and downright the name of it, or will they stick with President Trump, who has created this movement, and a lot of people say dictate where it goes?
Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Maverick.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
Let's not get crazy.
well, it does seem like the MAGA movement is feeling a little upset at President Trump. Listen to what he had to say on Tuesday in that interview with Laura Ingraham when the whole issue of H-1B visas came up, and what he had to say. Watch this.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we have plenty of talented people
no,
here.
You don't. No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have. You don't have certain talents, and people have to learn.
We don't have talented people here. And then there's been outrage over that comment from the president. The Washington Post on Thursday, the headline, Trump faces heat from MAGA based on America First agenda and Epstein. Eric Erickson, the conservative radio host, said, saying that we don't have talent in America doesn't sound very America First. Jasmine, I mean, a lot of folks, certainly on the left, a lot of folks in the press have been looking at when is that moment when there will be a cleaving between President Trump and the people who are following him. This seems like this is the clearest sign that there might be a separation, but is that, I'll just say it, is that hoping for too much?
Yeah, he's too excited.
I'm not sure that we've arrived there. I might be in the field that we may never arrive there, right? There may not be that clean break, but I think we did something for the Notice newsletter, which is that we went back to all of the Republican MAGA influencers that were in that binder meeting in February that a lot of White House officials feel that kind of kicked off how it started going left for the administration when it came to their handling of the Epstein files. And we went back through their social media feeds, and we tried to figure out who amongst those 10 to 15 people were talking about the Epstein files after the House Oversight Committee released some of those emails, and not very many of them were, of those 15 people that were holding those binders out. And if they were actually adopting the White House talking points that it was exonerating Trump and that this was a Democratic ploy to push them past the shutdown. And so I think on the Epstein stuff, you're not actually seeing that type of furor that you saw, at least from the base base of the party, from the folks who have the biggest microphones, that type of furor. But you are seeing that type of furor when you're talking about the H-1B visa issue, because that is something that obviously we know during the transition last year was a big issue. They kind of it was kind of MAGA versus Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy when they were talking about the H-1B visa issue. They had hoped they kind of gotten past it, and of course now Trump brought it back. And so I think you might see little cracks here and there, particularly when it comes to the issue of foreign nationals and who are taking jobs in this country and whether or not you're going against the real economic policy. I don't know if you're going to see that continuing with the base on Epstein voters, particularly because the White House, in a lot of ways, has been effective at putting that pressure down and telling them to look another place or look at other actors in this Epstein file and not Donald Trump.
Michael, you know, MTG on X posted about being contacted by security. So I'm now being contacted by private security firms with warnings for my safety, as a hotbed of threats against me are being fueled and egged on by the most powerful man in the world, the man I supported and helped get elected. Other than that last sentence, the rest of that sounds like things that Democrats have been saying for years about what happens when Donald Trump writes about you. So when you think about, or reporters who have been attacked by Trump and then have to be...
I'm thinking of David Hogg and what she did to David Hogg when he was still a teenager and she wasn't a member of Congress. But go on.
So I feel like one of the things that's been really interesting, I'm curious what you're hearing from Democrats who are trying to wrestle with this, is like folks have been saying like, welcome to the resistance, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or like, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene's all brand new and shiny. And is she? She still has views that I think a lot of Americans find abhorrent. Jewish space lasers, going after David Hogg, different kinds of things that she said. Is this a real change in Marjorie Taylor Greene? What are we seeing?
I mean,
and how are Democrats? And how are Democrats like the kind of thinking about and wrestling with it? Are they welcoming her into their new fold of resistance?
See, the interesting thing is that what she's new on is something she's actually never changed on, and that's the Epstein files. It's the president who's changed on that, right? The president's the one who campaigned on this, said that if I get to the White House, if you put me in the White House, I will release these documents. He has since changed his tune on that when he talked about the discharge petition.
But on health care, on women's rights, like at one point she said, this is why women don't vote for us. And it was like, oh, well, yeah.
I think Democrats are cautiously, obviously, approaching this. This is someone who has been a boogeyman on the left for years. They still use her in campaign ads. They still use her to rally votes and rally supporters. So I think they're entering it very cautiously. But look, they have a Republican firebrand who could be helpful on a number of their policy issues when they're approaching that. For example, when we were talking about those ACA subsidies, they would say even Marjorie Taylor Greene understands this issue. I think they may use it for messaging. Will they actually bring her as an ally when legislating? Look, a vote is a vote, and it's helpful, especially when it's a very narrowly divided House majority right now. But will we see Democrats actually like embracing Marjorie Taylor Greene? I don't know if we're there yet, but certainly when it helps them, I mean, yeah.
Today, new reaction to the explosive rift between President Trump and one of his most ardent supporters, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, branded a traitor to the Republican Party by the president this weekend, setting the stage for what could become wider cracks in the GOP. Representative Greene addressing the fallout today.
I stood with President Trump when virtually no one else did. Campaigned all over the country, spent millions of my own dollars helping him get elected. And I think that's incredibly important. And I do support him and his administration. And I support them in delivering the campaign promises we made to the American people. The most hurtful thing he said, which is absolutely untrue, is he called me a traitor. And that is so extremely wrong. And those are the types of words used that can radicalize people against me and put my life in danger.
Back with me, Stuart Stevens and Molly Jong-Fast. So, Molly, that last part, when she talked about her life being put in danger, she has already received threats on her life. She posted that on X because of Trump's takedown. And today, she says she's open to mending things with the president, okay? But I'm curious what you're seeing in this split. And if you think ultimately Trump's actions could work more against him and for her in the long run, because she has been a completely ardent supporter of Trump's. You can't take that away.
No,
No. And look, she is a political animal, and she sees an opportunity, right? She's an opportunist. Politicians are opportunists by nature, right. And she sees an opportunity. She would not be doing this if she did not see an opportunity and I don't think she thinks she's breaking with Trump. I think she thinks she's doing what the base wants. But what does the base want, right? The base was promised that Donald Trump was going to make things cheaper. It is now almost 10 months later. Things are more expensive. And the base was promised that Donald Trump was going to drain the swamp. He was going to expose the deep state that was, capable of all sorts of conspiracies. So here we are, and these are the two things that her constituents have wanted, and she is going to try and deliver them. The problem for Marjorie Taylor Greene, and this is the problem for all Republicans who break with Trump, is that the only rule of Trumpism is absolute fealty to Trump.
Mm-hmm. And he does have a big following on social media, let's face it, and he puts it all out there.
Right.
So, Stuart, does a reversal of support like this, does it scare Republicans? Should they be worried about getting on the president's bad side and being targeted by threats, too?
I just have to say about Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's a wealthy, powerful woman. And she was quiet and supported Trump when he attacked election workers, when he attacked the families of judges, when he rallied a mob to go and attack and brutally assault police officers. And yet now she's a victim. I mean, how pathetic is this? I don't think that there is any political gain in opposing the Epstein files. The only reason people are doing it is out of pressure, out of some sense that if they don't, that Trump is going to come after them. But I don't think this dam will hold because, you're protecting the release of information about child sex traffickers. How do you justify that? How did Mike Johnson go to church this morning and look at his other congregants and say, I'm the guy protecting a pedophile ring? I just think this is unsustainable.
You agree?
Yeah, I definitely think it's unsustainable. Also, the other thing about MAGA is it's all about scaring people, right? These people are all scared, so they all go along with it. But once you have one or two or three or four, or in this case, maybe hundreds of House Republicans who are going to vote for this discharge petition, that is the way you stand up to authoritarianism, right? Like experts on authoritarianism say you have to all be together. You have all the foundations have to be together. All the companies have to be together. You can't just have one or two stand up to him. And here we have a large number of House Republicans. And remember, House Republicans have a shorter election cycle. So they are more tuned in to polling. They're seeing more fundraising. They're seeing things in a way that a lot of senators aren't. And so I think all of this is meaningful. And I don't know, there's so many contradictions in Trumpism. Like, these women are like, he is not the feminist icon we thought he was. My man was, he's paid off porn stars. He's been married multiple times. He's had endless, misogynistic things that he said as, on the
Grab
regular.
them by the, okay,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
We'll go back to that one.
And,
right.
And all of a sudden they're like, he's maybe not for women and girls. Really, guys? You think? And I think it's unsustainable.
Stuart, do you think, to Molly's point, the fact that these House members are going to have to go to re-election less than a year from now, do you think this will be remembered? Could this take down a number of Republicans who don't vote to support this discharge petition?
I think it's going to depend on how competitive their district is. If you have anywhere, say, within 5 to 10 points of a competitive district. I made a lot of negative ads, but I never had the opportunity to make a negative ad attacking my client's opponent for protecting a pedophile ring. That would be the ultimate negative ad. And that's what they're doing here. They're protecting information about child sex trafficking. And you can't see the political downside of that. It's just extraordinary. So, yes, I think it can hurt them. Will they hurt them in a primary? I had a going out of business sale with any sort of optimism about the Republican Party, and I think the Republican Party is in this movement. And that's what we're seeing here.
Stuart, let me ask you really quickly. Do you think that there is MAGA without Donald Trump?
I think that what has been unleashed is a hate movement and extremism. And history tells us that once a major party or major factor in government embraces this, as the Republican Party did, it is very difficult to unwind. The ultimate anger of Trumpism is about what is happening to America, which a lot of us think is very hopeful, wealthiest country in the world. But we're going to become a minority-majority country. A lot of us think that that's going to make us more successful, more wealthy. And that's what drives them. So, no, I don't think that Trumpism is going to go away, because once you've done this, you can't go back.
Okay. Sobering thought, that's for sure. Stuart, thank you so much for sharing it. Molly, you too, for being here in studio with me, my friend. Good to have you.
The Trump administration is set on seizing control of American cities, specifically cities lived in and led by Democrats. Chicago's arguably gotten the worst of it so far. Federal troops patrolling the streets and what's been described as military-style ICE raids that have shaken communities and broken up families. The village of Broadview, just outside downtown Chicago, has become a flashpoint. Dozens of immigrants are being held at the Broadview ICE facility. It's unclear just how many, but one detainee testified that he was stuffed into a cell with around 150 other men. The facility's been accused of inhumane conditions. A judge even described them as unnecessarily cruel and disgusting. Last week, he ordered ICE officials to improve conditions at the facility. And for months, activists opposed to President Trump's immigration crackdown have protested outside that facility and are often met with aggression by officers. On Friday, a group of faith leaders planned a demonstration outside the Broadview facility. About 300 people showed up to sing songs and pray. But chaos soon erupted. Witnesses told local news that the protesters started moving from their designated area, and the officers began to push back. Law enforcement started clashing with the protesters. You can see here police shoving the crowd back. Several officers then wrestle a protester to the ground to cuff them. Behind them, a group of officers, these are faith leaders, by the way, a group of officers continue to shove the crowd, some using their batons and their shields to jab at the protesters. Here you can see a line of faith leaders, many in clerical collars, linking arms as officers push them back. And in this video, you can see multiple protesters being held on the ground as others are led off in handcuffs. 21 people were arrested. Witnesses say about 15 were members of the clergy. One of them was the Reverend Michael Wolfe. He's a Baptist minister seen in these pictures being held to the ground by officers. In this next clip, you'll hear Reverend Wolfe, while pinned to the concrete, explaining why he was there in the first place.
This is wrong. I'm here because there's torture in that facility. It's a concentration camp, and because my conscience calls me to do it.
2 police officers were injured during the confrontations. In a statement, the mayor of Broadview blamed the chaos on, quote, out-of-town protesters. Chicago's not unaccustomed to violent tactics by federal law enforcement. In fact, in October, a federal judge reined in some aggressive crowd control tactics being used by ICE and Border Patrol in the city, restricting their use of pepper balls and tear gas. That might have been one legal setback for Trump's federal takeover, and there have been others. But it still hasn't stopped the administration from invading other American cities, sending in federal officers, often against the express wishes of local leaders and communities, to carry out Trump's mass deportation agenda. Just yesterday, Border Patrol was deployed to Charlotte, North Carolina, and began making arrests around that city. One popular bakery closed business to protect its largely immigrant customer base. Congregants of a church scattered after federal agents descended upon them and detained one of their members. One man, a Honduran-born American citizen, we talked about this yesterday, an American citizen, had the window of his car shattered by immigration officers. And many Charlotte residents showed up to protest to support and protect their neighbors. Other cities, particularly those led by Democratic leaders, are bracing for Trump's next move. According to the New York Times, leaders in New York are preparing for a potential National Guard deployment here. Trump has threatened New York before, saying he'd send troops in to clean up the city if it elected Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani. Now that the people of New York City decisively elected Mamdani as their next mayor, tension is high as the city waits to see if the president will keep his word. I'm joined now by 2 great friends of our show. Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University. She's the author of Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream. I'm also with Brad Lander, New York City Comptroller. He's an immigration advocate, and he's a former Democratic mayoral candidate from earlier this year. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Christina, I haven't had a conversation with the mayor of Broadview, but I have some real distaste about what he said. These are out-of-town protesters. I want you to take us back to the civil rights movement. There were lots of out-of-town protesters. That was actually the point. You go anywhere you need to go where you can change and help things. Great if it's in your city, but it's okay if it's someone else's city.
Right, absolutely. And I wanted to just put a pin on a point that you made. These are interfaith pastors. And religious clergy members who are coming together. So it's not just one denomination, just like we saw in the civil rights movement. People from all across the spectrum saying this is not right from a whole host of reasons, not from an American democratic perspective, from a moral clarity perspective. That's one. And then two, this idea of, oh, they're out of town, so that's why we could behave this way. Well, the whole point is, as Americans, we are seeing this happen, as you said, not just in democratically led cities, but primarily cities that are led by African-American mayors. And I think New York knows that their time possibly will come because the president has promised as such. But we can't just sort of write it off as like, well, they're out-of-towners, as though that justifies.
Right, this is still your country. Charlotte's still my country. Chicago's my country.
If it's one city, it's all cities. And we know the reason why I care about Los Angeles and Chicago and Charlotte and Memphis, and the list goes on, and why we cared about Ohio when the president was saying Haitians eat cats and dogs. It's because this is our entire democratic project, small d democratic project. And we should all care what happens to our neighbors, whether they are documented or undocumented. And I think that's the larger point that so many Republicans are missing, and people who are just like, well, you know, they shouldn't have been there. It's like, well, we know that in this country, from protest to politics, African Americans have never gotten anything in this country without an active protest, and usually an active protest with other individuals coming in and having some skin in the game.
So, Brad, there have been some very big examples of federal intervention under the guise of crime or violent immigrants. We saw it in L.A., we saw it in the nation's capital. We're watching it unfold in Chicago and in Charlotte and in Portland. But New York will be the biggest example, right? It's one of the most important cities in the world. It's the biggest city in the country.
Trump's home. It's
Trump's home, and he's talked about it a lot. He's already implied that something will happen in New York. Tell me how you are thinking about this.
So we're already seeing it here. Of course, they've been doing it at 26 Federal Plaza, but now they've been out in neighborhoods on Canal Street. They grabbed 9 people, 4 of them U.S. citizens. There was an abduction in Washington
And let's
Heights.
just be clear, for people who aren't familiar with Canal Street, these are normally vendors selling
knockoff
Gucci bags. You can like that or not like that. It might be a really bad thing, but it's not a national security issue.
Correct. This past week, they grabbed somebody in Washington Heights, uptown. There were ICE agents out in Sunset Park, a Brooklyn immigrant neighborhood. So you can start to feel it on the ground. Yesterday, we fanned out across the city to let small business owners know what to do if they come into your small business, because, you know, unfortunately, ICE agents can walk into your business like any other customer. But if you put up a sign that says employees only on your back door, now they would need a judicial warrant to go into your break room. And New Yorkers are getting organized. They don't even need to know in advance. On Canal Street, hundreds of New Yorkers poured out to say, get out of here. So I'm not sure ICE knows what they're going to get into if they come for New York.
I want to go back to comparing this to the civil rights movement, because I remember when those 2 legislators recently in Tennessee, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, got ejected from the legislature for fighting for gun control. Someone commented they're just doing this for the press. And I remember Reverend Al telling me, of course we were doing it. We were always doing it for the press. That's the only reason anybody else knows these things are happening, because the press shows up. You don't need the press now. Just people with phones show up and record this. This is important. What Brad just said, when Americans show up and take their phones out and demonstrate what's going on, this is how change happens.
Absolutely, Ali. And you remember one of the chants from the civil rights movement was, the entire world is watching.
Right, that's right.
And, you know, when we think about sort of photographers, you know, Gordon Parks and so many other photographers who took these images and exported them, not just across the country, but the world saw what
they saw
this
dogs,
country,
they saw fire hoses.
Exactly, what this country was doing to its own citizens, its own African-American patriots. And so I think that's really important, especially since so many of us have the opportunity to export this information, whether it's on social media media, whether it's through your own personal networks. This is, remember, the role of the black press. You know, I write a weekly column for the Amsterdam News because I believe that the black press should still exist. They were part of the reason why people knew what was happening in black communities in Chicago and Los Angeles, in New York, when we weren't always connected. And so I think it's really important for us to keep sharing these stories. We've seen it on an international perspective become very effective, and we need to make sure we do it in an American perspective. As Brad said, there are a lot of New Yorkers who want to do something and don't really know what to do. And it's like the way that we can share these images and make sure that this information, correct information, is disseminated quickly as well to protect our fellow neighbors. And they don't have to be our fellow citizens. They're our fellow neighbors.
This has become a moral discussion now.
Absolutely.
And Brad, I mean, we sound like a broken record, but I've spent years saying that our most important job in media is to bear witness. You can't hold anybody to account if you didn't see it, if it didn't happen. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one to see it, it doesn't happen. But now what you have demonstrated, including in getting arrested by going to court, is that you're bearing witness. All you're doing showing up in court, you're not actually stopping ICE from doing anything, but you are there to say, I saw it with my own eyes. It's happening.
That's right. And after I got arrested the first time, just for trying to accompany a man named Edgardo out of the building, I went back. I mean, I've been going back every week to bear witness. One time I went back with about a dozen other elected officials, and we demanded to get into the 10th floor at 26 Federal Plaza, like at Broadview, because the conditions on the other side, a judge has said, violate the law. They wouldn't let us in. We're in court on Tuesday on our arrest there, and we're going to keep demanding to bring eyes to that building, because that's what bearing witness is.
Because the federal government says they're holding everybody in perfectly good conditions in accordance with whatever the law says, and yet we're getting testimony from people who say that's not true.
Correct. And of course, they're also saying these people are a threat or are, you know, but in Chicago this week, ICE was forced to release in federal court, information of the 607 immigrants they've detained. Only 16 were in any way deemed to be a threat to anybody's safety. So 97% of people are either U.S. citizens or people who are here seeking asylum and not causing anybody any harm.
So this threat is an interesting thing, Christina, because Donald Trump started by saying it was murderers and rapists when he started his first election. But then it became about, terrorists or whatever the case is, MS-13. Everybody was MS-13 or Tren de Aragua. They seem to just have skipped all that part.
No, we're not there anymore. Now it's just brown people who shouldn't be here. That is part of the larger Trump administration project, and Republicans have to own it. They're in lockstep with the president. So he's essentially saying, we can pick up brown people off the street. It doesn't matter if they're documented or undocumented. I mean, they use that horrible language of legal and illegal, which is absolutely
because and Brad has made this point that you can be undocumented and be going through a legal process on an ongoing basis at 26 Federal Plaza, and then they lock you up.
And how are we to know? And so the fact that so many communities are living in fear, right? The fact that ICE agents are coming and just observing, soup kitchens. They're observing people going to work. They're observing people dropping their kids off of school. The point is to terrorize people. The point is to make them go into the shadows and not be a part of the American collective experience. And so that's a level of cruelty that was promised the first time and the second time. That's the level of cruelty that Kamala Harris walked us through in her campaign, saying this is what Donald Trump is saying he will do, because we've heard him say it out of his own mouth. So there's so many people still pearl clutching, like, how did we get here? We got here because he told you that's where we're going. And so now it's going to take a lot more people who've been on the sidelines, a lot more people who don't think that they have some sort of investment in getting us on the other side of this cruelty. The same way with the civil rights movement.
It's regular people who had to. It has
to take regular people who are just like, well, I don't really feel like it has anything to do with me. It absolutely does have to do with you.
That's a good point. Well, thank you to both of you. I appreciate it. Christina Greer is an associate professor of political science at Fordham University.
We begin this hour with the most anticipated vote this week in Congress as the House decides whether to force the Justice Department to release all of its files regarding convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. It will be a moment when all 433 sitting members of the House will need to go on record with where they stand on this issue. For Republican lawmakers, Donald Trump will be watching closely, but so will Epstein survivors, some of whom are planning to be at the Capitol ahead of the vote. On Friday, a group of survivors released a letter to Congress, writing in part, several weeks ago, when a few brave survivors stood before you and recounted their harrowing stories, many of you were shaken to your core. We urge you, when you cast your vote, please do not forget the horror you felt that day. There is no middle ground here. There is no hiding behind party affiliation. The testimonies you heard are just a fraction of the unimaginable suffering endured by more than 1,000 victims alike. As you gather with your family this season, remember that your primary duty is to your constituents. Look into the eyes of your children, your sisters, your mothers, and your aunts. Imagine if they had been preyed upon. Imagine if you yourself were a survivor. What would you want for them? What would you want for yourself? When you vote, we will remember your decision at the ballot box. Joining us now, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State and Jeffrey Epstein survivor Haley Robson, who will be joining other survivors on Capitol Hill this week ahead of the vote. Thank you both very much for coming to the weekend. Haley, let me start with you. What do you and other survivors want to accomplish? What's planned for when you come back to Capitol Hill and stand on those steps again and speak not only before the American people, but to the men and women in the House who will be set to vote?
I mean, the agenda is very clear. We want transparency. We want to touch base and reach out to all the members of Congress. We want to show our support not only for the members of Congress who courageously are on our side, who are starting to ask questions, who are signing the discharge petition and now signing the Transparency Act bill. We intend to come to the Capitol to reinforce our agenda, to let America see us united again, to keep on this journey of demanding transparency, and to just keep letting the world and reminding the world as well as members of Congress that, hey, listen, we're still here. We're here. We're ready. Let's do this. Let's get all the transparency that we've been asking for. Let's get that out on the table. Let's come together and support each other and get some things done in Washington.
Congresswoman Jayapal, what we've heard from the reporting, from our MS Now colleagues and from folks around the kind of reporting culture in the world is that there's a lot more Republicans who are going to be coming out than the 4 that signed on to this discharge petition. Some say dozens, some say up to 100. But I'm curious for those that don't seem like they're on their way to vote alongside Democrats here. When you talk to them, or if you're hearing from them, how are they thinking about standing with the survivors or just standing with Donald Trump? Like, how are they working through that? Because it seems, I think, to a lot of Americans, pretty clear, and many of the Republicans that are in office right now ran on this exact issue.
Well, that's right, Eugene. And I just have to say to Haley and to all the survivors, that is the single most powerful thing that can happen right now, is for them to be in people's faces with their courage, with their bravery. Thank you, Haley. Thank you to all the survivors, because you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. You have to be able to listen to these stories and then say that you are not going to vote to expose the pedophiles and the rich and powerful people that were part of this massive, horrific, exploitative ring of sexual predators. And I think that for the Republicans that are not going to vote yes on this, and I don't know how many of them there are, but they are absolutely going to have to talk to their own people, because this isn't just a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is really across the board. Do you want to protect children? Do you want to protect the people out there that have been abused by this ring? Or do you want to actually expose and be transparent about everything that has happened? I think that we will have at least dozens of Republicans. I don't know what the number is, but I know that Thomas Massie, who I spoke to the other day on the floor, has been telling people, look, you may think Donald Trump is going to protect you for this election, but think about when he's out of office. Think about 4 years down the road, 6 years down the road. What are you going to say to your own daughters? What are you going to say to your own constituents about whether or not you voted to protect pedophiles, because that's what this is. And so I feel pretty confident that we're going to pass this bill, this vote on the discharge petition with big numbers. I hope they're as big as possible, because we still need to put pressure on the Senate to be able to get the votes to an override-proof majority. It's stunning to me that Trump would even think about overriding, but obviously he's obsessed with covering this up and covering up whatever role he may have had in this, or his billionaire buddies may have had in this.
Haley, despite how accessible Trump sometimes makes himself and how invested his supporters are in this story specifically, you and other survivors have not been afforded a meeting in the Oval Office to make a personal appeal to this president. If he happens to be watching the program right now, or if you did have the opportunity to meet with him, what would your personal appeal to him be on why he should release these files?
I understand the predicament he's in. I try to understand. I try to be compassionate. I try to be patient. But we are now decades into this, where the survivors have been begging and asking and pleading with not just the politicians, but the public to please help us understand what we went through and try to support and help us get to some type of resolve. And, you know, if I could sit down with President Trump, it would be to look at him and say, where did we go wrong? Who owns you? What happened from last year to now? What event or what person or what influence changed the fact that you campaigned in 2024 on releasing the Epstein files? And how do we get back to the person I voted for and put in office? Because I feel extremely betrayed. And a lot of this that I'm enduring and the other survivors are enduring with the gaslighting and the, playing both sides of the fence. And, 1 minute you want to release the files, the next minute it's no, we absolutely cannot do that. You have to understand, for the survivors, it's very confusing when there's no explanation or resolve. And of course, at that point now, our conspiracies and our opinions are starting to change vastly, because now we're like, well, you've been saying that you're not involved. And, for the most part, we haven't seen anything directly linking you to, abusing any of us specifically. I just don't understand, at what point do you not make yourself look guilty? Because at the end of the day, all he is doing is making himself look like he is guilty of something. And it's not okay. We don't like what's going on. We want to help and change the dynamic of being on the right side of things. I think Jay Appel said it so beautifully. It is no room in society for pedophilia. We shall not be protecting pedophilia, whether it's a lower middle class perpetrator or somebody who has the status and wealth and connections like Jeffrey did. It is intolerable. What happened to this country? What happened to protecting the children?
Haley, you said something a moment ago that made all of us snap to attention, and that is, you said you voted for Donald Trump. Did you vote for him? Was part of the reason why you voted for him was because he made it part of his message that he would release the Epstein files, one, and two, what do you make of the fact that now not only is he calling it a hoax, but he's now calling on the Attorney General to investigate Bill Clinton and other political foes, Democrats, left-leaning folks, in the Epstein issue for something that he says is a hoax. But first, was it the promise of releasing the files that earned your vote for him?
So as an American, everybody has their policy or their issue that really is an important factor to the voting, to casting their ballot. There are things that I voted for certain reasons, and I did vote for Trump One, because in 2024, his entire campaign had been based on the idea of exposing the government and releasing the files from Jeffrey Epstein and being able to give us transparency. And in all fairness, it wasn't just Trump. It was his entire administration, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi. They all sat there and screamed to the top of their lungs about transparency and how they were going to release the files. So that is definitely a factor. That is pretty much the reason I voted for Trump, in addition to, in 2009, him and Brad Edwards, which is my legal representation, had a conversation. Trump gave our attorney insight and information that checked out. So I believe that this man ideally had the right intention and wanted to expose the pedophiles and wanted to release the Epstein files as he campaigned on it. However, obviously, as the entire world and the entire country is seeing not just Trump, but his entire administration backpedal, and now they've turned against us, making us an enemy, and I don't understand why. And I think the more emails and the more information that's coming out, we're starting to see exactly why those emails and documentation in the Epstein files that Pam Bondi called them are not being released. And I will say that I do have regret. I feel betrayed by my own party, and it goes beyond just the fact that he's involved in the files or has been named in the Epstein files, whether he's complicit or actively involved. The point that we're trying to make as survivors is we still don't know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, and this is problematic for us. And by the release of all the Epstein files, it will vindicate those who need to be vindicated, and it's going to serve indictments to those who need to be indicted. And we need those transparency. We need those files, resolved. We need them displayed for the public and displayed to the survivors so we can have closure, so we understand what was done. And so not just us, but Congress and the entire world can see who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. Because right now, I think what we're dealing with is the dribble and drizzle of information that is clouding the real base of this story, which is identifying the perpetrators and the victims. And right now, we need clarity on who was involved. And it's too slow. It's happening at a very slow pace, and we would like to pick up the pace a little bit.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal and Haley Roxton, thank you so much. And Haley, thank you for coming on, and to all of the survivors who are coming this week. Take care of yourselves.